Hi, I'm Madison. I'm a nurse working double shifts at St. Mary's Hospital in downtown Chicago, and for the past 6 years, I've been grinding through 12-hour shifts just to keep up with my student loan payments. But when my parents looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your older brother earned it," before handing over everything, the house, the money, our entire family's future, to Derek, I had no idea how much they'd regret those four simple words. You see, I always thought I was doing everything right. While Derek was partying his way through college on my parents' dime, I was working two jobs to pay for nursing school. While he was finding himself in his 20s, bouncing from one failed business venture to another, I was building a career, saving lives, and somehow still finding time to help our family whenever they needed it. But apparently, none of that mattered, because Derek had a wife, Derek had kids, Derek had earned it. The day everything changed was a cold Tuesday in November. We'd all gathered at Thompson and Associates, the law firm that had handled my grandmother's affairs for over 30 years. Grandma Rose had passed 6 months earlier, and we were finally settling her estate. I remember walking into that sterile conference room, the smell of old leather and coffee hanging in the air, and seeing Derek already seated at the head of the table like he owned the place. His wife, Jennifer, was beside him, bouncing their 2-year-old on her lap while their 4-year-old colored quietly in a corner chair. Mom and Dad sat across from them, and I took the remaining seat, feeling somehow like an outsider in my own family's business. Mr. Thompson, a silver-haired man who'd known our family for decades, cleared his throat and began reading from what he called the family's decision regarding Rose's estate. Now, let me paint you a picture of what we were talking about here. Grandma Rose's house was a beautiful Victorian on the North Shore, easily worth $800,000, maybe more. She'd bought it back in 1963 for $32,000 and had maintained it immaculately her entire life. Plus, there was nearly $200,000 in various savings accounts and investments. We're talking about a life-changing amount of money. As Mr. Thompson spoke, my parents explained their decision. Derek would inherit the house and the majority of the financial assets. Their reasoning? Derek has a family to provide for. He has responsibilities. Madison is young and capable. She'll be fine on her own. I felt my stomach drop. "Wait," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't understand. Grandma never mentioned—" "Madison," my father interrupted, his tone sharp in that way that meant the discussion was over. "Your brother earned this. He's the one who visited Grandma every Sunday for the last 5 years. He's the one who helped her with yard work and repairs. He's the one who has children to think about." Derek nodded along, trying to look modest, but failing to hide the satisfaction in his eyes. "I mean, I never expected anything," he said with false humility. "But Mom and Dad are right. Jen and I need the stability for the kids' futures." I looked around the room, feeling like I was in some alternate reality. "But I helped too," I managed to say. "I drove Grandma to all her doctor appointments because I understood her medical conditions. I spent my days off helping her organize her medications. I was the one who stayed with her in the hospital when she had pneumonia." My mother's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "Honey, we know you cared about Grandma, but Derek has been more present, more involved in the family business. You've been so focused on your career, your own life. This is about who's really committed to family." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own life? My career? I'd chosen nursing specifically because I wanted to help people, to make a difference. And every single time my family had needed financial help, when Dad lost his job 3 years ago, when Mom needed dental work their insurance wouldn't cover, when Derek's last business opportunity fell through, I was the one they called. I was the one who had $15,000 in my savings account that I immediately transferred to help them keep their house when Dad was unemployed for 8 months, but apparently none of that counted as being committed to family. Mr. Thompson handed Derek a folder with property deeds and account information. "The transfer should be complete within 30 days, he said. "Madison, there is one item specifically designated for you." He reached into a small box and pulled out my grandmother's silver bracelet, the one she'd worn every single day for as long as I could remember. It was beautiful, with intricate Celtic knots that caught the light. but compared to nearly $1 million in assets, it felt like a consolation prize, like a pat on the head. "Grandma wanted you to have this," Mr. Thompson said gently. "She always said you had her spirit." I took the bracelet with trembling hands, and for a moment I could swear I felt Grandma's presence. She'd always been the strongest woman I knew, the one who'd raised 5 children during the Depression, who'd worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, who'd built the life that we were now dividing up like poker chips. Derek was already making plans. "I'm thinking we could sell the house, maybe invest in that tech startup Jim's been telling me about. The returns could be incredible." "Derek," I said quietly, "that house has been in our family for 60 years. Grandma loved that house." He shrugged. "Madison, we can't be sentimental about real estate. This is about making smart financial decisions for the future." As we left the law office, Derek walked ahead with his family, already on his phone with real estate agents. My parents flanked him like bodyguards, discussing renovation plans that would increase the sale value. I walked behind them, clutching Grandma's bracelet, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. That night, I sat in my small apartment, the one I'd been renting because I couldn't afford a down payment on anything decent while paying off student loans, and really looked at Grandma's bracelet for the first time. There was an engraving on the inside that I'd never noticed before. "Strong women raise strong women. Rose 1963. 1963, the year she'd bought the house. Have you ever been the forgotten child while a sibling got everything? Have you ever been told you didn't earn what felt rightfully yours? Comment below and share your story with me, because I'm learning that I'm not alone in this. The following week, my parents invited me to Sunday dinner, our traditional family gathering that had continued even after Grandma's passing. I drove the 45 minutes from my apartment to their suburban home, the same route I'd taken every week for the past year to pick up Grandma for these dinners. Derek and his family were already there when I arrived, and the house buzzed with excitement. Jennifer was showing Mom paint samples on her phone while Derek and Dad pored over real estate listings on Dad's laptop. "Madison!" Derek called out as I walked into the kitchen. "Perfect timing. I wanted to run something by you." I set down the bottle of wine I'd brought, a nice Pinot Grigio that had cost me $40 I really couldn't afford, and forced a smile. "What's up?" "So, I've been talking to this investor friend of mine, Jim Patterson. You remember Jim from college, right? He's got this incredible opportunity in biotech startups. The projections are showing potential returns of 300 to 400% over the next 2 years. I felt my chest tighten. "Derek, what does this have to do with me?" "Well, I'm thinking of liquidating the house pretty quickly so we can get in on the ground floor of this investment. The thing is, I wanted to run it by the family first, since I know Grandma's house has sentimental value." I stared at him. "You want to sell Grandma's house to invest in a startup?" "Not just any startup," he said enthusiastically. "This is biotech, Madison. It's the future. Jim says they're developing some kind of revolutionary blood testing technology. Think about it. You're a nurse. You know how big this could be." Mom appeared beside us, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "We think it sounds like a wonderful opportunity, honey. Derek has such a good head for business." "Mom," I said carefully, "Derek's last wonderful opportunity was that cryptocurrency trading platform that lost $12,000 in 6 months." Derek's face flushed. "That was different. The market conditions were..." "Or the year before that, when you invested in your friend's food truck business that folded after 3 months," I continued. "Or the online retail company that never actually sold anything." "Madison." Dad's voice came from the living room, stern and warning. "Your brother is trying to secure his family's future. The least you could do is be supportive." I walked into the living room where Dad sat with his laptop, Derek's 4-year-old Tommy, building blocks at his feet. "Dad, I'm not trying to be unsupportive. I'm trying to be realistic. That house is worth almost $1 million. It's been in our family for 60 years. Maybe we should think about this more carefully." Dad closed the laptop and looked at me with disappointment. "Madison, I have to ask. When was the last time you visited that house? When was the last time you showed any real interest in maintaining it or being part of its upkeep?" The question felt like a trap. "Dad, I work 12-hour shifts. When I have time off, I'm usually recovering or helping with..." "Exactly," he interrupted. You're focused on your own life, your own career. Derek has been the one maintaining relationships, being present for family events, thinking about the bigger picture. Jennifer joined us from the kitchen carrying 2-year-old Sophie. Madison, I hope you don't think we're being unfair. It's just that Derek and I have been planning for the children's college funds, and this investment could really secure their futures. I looked around the room at my family, at Derek explaining his business plan to Mom, at Dad nodding approvingly, at Jennifer bouncing Sophie while Tommy played at our feet. They all seemed so certain, so unified in their decision. And there I was, the selfish daughter who just didn't understand the bigger picture. Has anyone considered what Grandma would have wanted? I asked quietly. Derek stopped talking and turned to face me. Madison, Grandma's gone. We can't make decisions based on what we think she might have wanted. We have to make decisions based on what's best for the living family. She loved that house, I insisted. She spent 60 years making it a home. She used to tell me stories about every room, every piece of furniture, the garden she planted, the Christmas trees in the front window, the birthday parties in the backyard. Mom sighed. Honey, those are beautiful memories, but memories don't pay for Tommy's and Sophie's educations. They don't help Derek and Jennifer build a stable future. But destroying the place where those memories were made does? I asked. The room went quiet. Derek set down his phone and looked at me with what I can only describe as practiced patience, like he was explaining something to a child. Madison, I think you're being emotional about this. I understand that you have sentimental attachments, but we have to be practical. The housing market is strong right now. If we wait too long, we might miss the window for both the sale and the investment opportunity. Plus, Jennifer added gently, it's not like the memories disappear just because the house changes owners. The important thing is family, not buildings. I felt my grandmother's bracelet against my wrist, the weight of it somehow heavier than it should have been. What if I wanted to buy the house? Everyone stopped talking. Derek actually laughed. Madison, no offense, but you're a nurse with student loans. The house is worth $800,000 minimum. Do you have $800,000? The condescension in his voice made my face burn. I could get a mortgage. I could make payments. The house could stay in the family. Dad shook his head. Honey, that doesn't make financial sense. Derek would have to wait years to see any return, and you'd be house poor trying to maintain a property that size on a nurse's salary. Besides, Derek added, I've already been promised this investment opportunity. Jim's expecting an answer by next week. Promised? I repeated. Derek, you haven't even officially inherited the house yet. The paperwork isn't finalized. Derek's expression hardened. The decision's been made, Madison. Mom and Dad have been very clear about their wishes. I earned this inheritance through years of being present, being involved, being the son who showed up. Just because you're having second thoughts now doesn't change the fact that this was decided months ago. I looked at my parents. Months ago? You made this decision months ago and nobody thought to discuss it with me? Mom reached over and patted my hand. Sweetheart, we knew you'd have feelings about it. But Derek's right. The decision was based on who's been most committed to family over the years. You've been so busy with work and your own life. My own life? I stood up, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Mom, 3 years ago when Dad lost his job, who gave you $15,000 to keep this house? When you needed dental work, who paid for it? When Derek's cryptocurrency thing fell apart and he needed help with his mortgage, who co-signed his loan modification? Derek stood up too. Madison, that's not fair. You're making it sound like... Like what, Derek? Like I've been the one actually helping this family financially while you've been chasing get-rich-quick schemes? That's enough, Dad said firmly. Madison, we appreciate the help you've given over the years, but that doesn't entitle you to make decisions about Grandma's estate. Derek has been the one consistently present, consistently involved in family matters beyond just writing checks. The words hung in the air like a slap. Writing checks. As if my contribution to this family could be reduced to transactions. As if the nights I'd spent in the ER at the hospital where Dad was treated after his heart episode didn't matter. As if the weekends I'd spent helping Mom clean out Grandma's attic didn't count. As if the years I'd been the reliable daughter, the one they called when they needed something, meant nothing because I didn't show up for every single Sunday dinner. I touched Grandma's bracelet again, remembering the way she used to hold my hand when I was little, how she'd tell me that the women in our family were survivors, that we knew how to take care of ourselves and the people we loved. "You know what?" I said quietly. "You're right. Derek earned it. He earned it by being the son who was available when it was convenient, who could afford to be present because he never had to work multiple jobs to pay for his own education. He earned it by having a family that needs security, even though that security depends on liquidating the foundation that provided it in the first place." I picked up my purse and headed toward the door. "Madison," Mom called after me. "Don't leave like this. Your family." I turned back to look at them, at Derek already pulling out his phone to call his investor friend, at Jennifer bouncing Sophie while Tommy played with blocks that would probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, at my parents who genuinely seemed to believe they were making the right decision. "You're right, Mom. I am family. But apparently, I'm the wrong kind of family." As I drove home that night, I kept thinking about Grandma's bracelet and the engraving inside. "Strong women raise strong women." I wondered what Grandma would have thought about Derek's plan to sell her house for a biotech gamble. I wondered if she'd really intended for everything she'd built to disappear into someone else's startup dreams. But mostly, I wondered if I was crazy for thinking that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this story than what my family was telling me. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I called Mr. Thompson's office and left a message asking if I could schedule a private appointment to discuss my grandmother's estate. I told his secretary that I had some questions about the inheritance process and wanted to make sure I understood everything correctly. Because something about that day at the law office had been bothering me. Something about the way Mr. Thompson had hesitated before handing Derek the paperwork. Something about the way he'd looked at me when he gave me Grandma's bracelet, like he wanted to say more but couldn't. I had a feeling that Derek hadn't earned everything. I had a feeling that the real story was just beginning. 3 days later, I found myself sitting in Mr. Thompson's office again, but this time the atmosphere felt completely different. Without my family there, the room seemed larger, quieter, and somehow more honest. Mr. Thompson sat across from me, his weathered hands folded on his desk, and I could see something in his eyes that I'd missed during our first meeting. Concern. Maybe even guilt. "Madison," he began carefully, "I'm glad you called. I've been handling your grandmother's affairs for over 20 years, and I have to say this situation has been unusual." My heart started beating faster. "What do you mean, unusual?" He opened a file cabinet behind his desk and pulled out a thick folder. "Your grandmother was very specific about her wishes. Very specific. She updated her will multiple times over the past 5 years, and each time she was quite clear about her intentions." I leaned forward. "Mr. Thompson, I don't understand. Are you saying the will we heard wasn't accurate?" He was quiet for a long moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Madison, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Did your parents ever mention that your grandmother had asked to speak with you privately about her estate?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "No, they never mentioned anything like that. She called my office 6 times in the last year of her life, asking me to arrange a meeting with you specifically. She said she had important documents she wanted to discuss with you, documents that were separate from the main estate planning. Each time, I was told by your parents that you were too busy with work, that they would handle communicating her wishes to you." The room started spinning slightly. "Mr. Thompson, are you telling me that what we heard in that meeting wasn't my grandmother's real will?" He stood up and walked to a large safe in the corner of his office. "Madison, I'm going to share something with you, but I need you to understand that this puts me in a very difficult legal position. Your grandmother left very specific instructions about what should happen if certain circumstances arose." He returned to his desk with a manila envelope that looked significantly thicker than the documents Derek had received. 3 months before she passed, your grandmother came to this office with her own safety deposit box key. She said she'd been keeping some documents secure because she was concerned about family dynamics. My hands were shaking as he handed me the envelope. She made me promise that if you ever came to this office asking questions about the estate, I was to give you this immediately. She said, and I quote, "Madison will know what to do with the truth." Inside the envelope were several documents, but the first one I saw made my breath catch. It was a will, dated just 4 months before Grandma's death, and it was completely different from what we'd heard in that family meeting. According to this document, I was the primary beneficiary of Grandma's estate, not Derek. Me. The house, the investments, the savings accounts, 70% of everything was designated for me. Derek was to receive 20%, and the remaining 10% was earmarked for his children's education funds. But there were conditions. The house could never be sold for investment purposes. If I chose to sell it, the proceeds had to go into a trust for Derek's children, and Derek would forfeit his 20% inheritance. "Mr. Thompson," I whispered, staring at the documents, "why didn't you present this will at the family meeting?" His expression grew troubled. "Madison, this is where things get complicated. Your parents contacted me 2 weeks before the meeting and presented me with what they claimed was your grandmother's final will, a document supposedly signed just days before her death. They said she'd changed her mind about the inheritance and wanted Derek to have everything." He pulled out another document, and I recognized it immediately. It was the will that had been read at our family meeting. But as I looked more closely, something seemed off about the signature. "I had concerns about the authenticity of this newer document," Mr. Thompson continued. "The handwriting looked slightly different, and frankly, it contradicted everything your grandmother had told me about her intentions. But your parents insisted it was genuine, and they had medical documents suggesting your grandmother's cognitive abilities were declining in her final days." I felt sick. "Are you saying my parents forged Grandma's will?" "I'm saying that I had enough concerns that I advised a handwriting analysis, but your parents threatened legal action if I delayed the estate settlement. They said you were all grieving and needed closure, and that questioning the document would be traumatic for everyone involved." The room was spinning now. I set the documents on his desk and put my head in my hands. "So, what you're telling me is that my grandmother wanted me to inherit her house, but my parents convinced you to ignore her real will." "Madison, there's more." He pulled out a small digital recorder. "Your grandmother asked me to keep this for you specifically. She recorded it during our final meeting when she brought me the safety deposit box key." He pressed play, and suddenly Grandma's voice filled the room, weaker than I remembered, but unmistakably hers. "Madison, sweetheart, if you're hearing this, it means the family has tried to hide the truth from you. I want you to know that this house, this legacy, it belongs to you. You're the one who understands what family really means. You're the one who's been taking care of everyone else without expecting anything in return. Derek is a good boy, but he's never learned the value of work, the value of sacrifice. He thinks everything should come easy, and your parents have enabled that thinking his whole life." I started crying, hearing her voice again, knowing that she'd been trying to reach me and I'd never known. The recording continued. "I've left you the majority of my estate because I trust you to use it wisely, to build something meaningful with it. But more than that, I've left you proof of your strength. Check the lining of my jewelry box, the one I gave you with the bracelet. There's something there that will help you understand your true worth." Mr. Thompson stopped the recording. "Madison, I should have fought harder to present this will initially. I should have insisted on the handwriting analysis regardless of your parents' threats. I failed your grandmother, and I failed you." I drove home in a daze, Grandma's real will and her recording burning like fire in my passenger seat. When I got to my apartment, I went straight to my dresser where I'd placed Grandma's jewelry box, a beautiful wooden case that had held her bracelet and a few other small pieces. I'd never thought to examine it closely, but now I ran my fingers along the interior until I found a loose section of the velvet lining. Underneath, taped to the bottom of the box, was a small key and a note in Grandma's handwriting. "Safety Deposit Box 247, First National Bank. Your real inheritance is your courage, sweetheart. Use it." The next morning, I went to the bank. Box 247 contained documents that made my hands shake, copies of every loan I'd ever given my family, with my grandmother's handwritten notes about each one. She'd been keeping track. She'd known about the $15,000 for Dad's unemployment, the dental work for Mom, the loan co-signing for Derek. But more than that, she documented Derek's failed investments, his pattern of financial irresponsibility, and his history of borrowing money from family members without paying it back. There was also a folder labeled "For Madison's Future" containing stock certificates and bond documents that weren't part of the main estate. Her personal gift to me, worth nearly $50,000. And then, at the bottom of the box, there was a letter that made me sit down hard on the bank's marble floor. "My dearest Madison," it began, "I know your parents will try to convince you that Derek deserves everything because he has a family to support. But you need to understand something about your parents that I should have told you years ago. They've always been afraid of your independence, your strength. They've spent your whole life trying to convince you that you need to sacrifice for others, that your worth comes from how much you give up for family. But that's not love, sweetheart. That's control. Derek has never had to face real consequences for his choices because your parents have always bailed him out. You, on the other hand, have been forced to become strong, capable, and self-reliant. They call it selfish when you focus on your career, but what they really mean is that they can't control you the way they control Derek. This inheritance isn't just about money or property. It's about recognizing that you've earned your place in this family through genuine contribution, not through manipulation and dependence. You've given more to this family than Derek ever has, and you've done it without expecting anything in return. I'm leaving you this estate because I trust you to break the cycle. Don't let them guilt you into giving it up. Don't let them convince you that Derek's needs are more important than your own. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Now it's time to take care of yourself." I sat in that bank vault for 2 hours, reading and rereading her words, understanding for the first time that I wasn't crazy, that the dynamic I'd felt my whole life was real and it had been witnessed by someone who loved me. When I finally got home, my phone was ringing. It was my mother. "Madison, honey, I hope you're not still upset about Sunday dinner. You know we love you just as much as Derek." "Mom," I said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did Grandma ever try to arrange private meetings with me about her estate?" There was a long pause. "Madison, why would you ask something like that?" "Because I've been talking to Mr. Thompson, and he seems to think she did." Another pause, longer this time. "Honey, your grandmother was very sick in her final months. She was saying a lot of things that didn't make sense. We didn't want to burden you with her confusion." "What kind of things?" "Oh, she kept insisting that she'd made some kind of special arrangements for you, that there were documents she needed to show you. But Madison, we looked through everything. There were no special documents. She was just not herself toward the end." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of Grandma's bracelet on my wrist and her real will in my hands. "Mom, what if she wasn't confused? What if there really were documents?" "Madison, sweetheart, you're starting to sound like you think we didn't handle Grandma's affairs properly. Do you really think your father and I would hide something from you?" And that's when I realized that they genuinely believed their own story. They'd convinced themselves that Grandma's real will was the product of confusion, that their version of events was the truth. They'd probably destroyed or hidden her attempts to contact me because they truly believed they were protecting me from an elderly woman's delusions. But their good intentions didn't change the fact that they'd stolen my inheritance and given it to Derek. A month later, everything changed with a single phone call. I was at work, halfway through a night shift in the cardiac unit, when my phone rang. It was Mom, and she sounded panicked. "Madison, I need to talk to you right away. Are you busy?" I stepped into the break room. "Mom, I'm at work. What's wrong?" "It's Derek, the investment. It didn't work out the way he planned." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean it didn't work out?" "The company, that biotech startup Jim recommended, it went bankrupt. Derek put everything into it, Madison." "Everything. The money from selling Grandma's house, his own savings, even some money he borrowed against his 401k. I sat down hard on one of the break room chairs. "Mom, how much money are we talking about?" "Nearly $1 million, Madison. It's all gone." The break room was spinning. What about the house? Please tell me he didn't sell the house yet. Oh, honey, he sold it 3 weeks ago. He needed the cash to meet the minimum investment requirement. The buyers were a young couple from California who paid cash. They wanted a quick closing. I couldn't breathe. Grandma's house, the house that should have been mine, the house that had been in our family for 60 years, was gone. Sold to strangers so Derek could chase another get-rich-quick scheme that had predictably fallen apart. Madison, are you there? I'm here, Mom. There's more. Derek and Jennifer, they can't make their mortgage payments now. Jennifer's part-time job doesn't cover much, and Derek's been out of steady work since he quit his last job to focus on the investment. They're looking at foreclosure. I felt a cold rage building in my chest. Mom, why are you telling me this? Well, we were hoping. We know you've been upset about the inheritance situation, but this is a family crisis. Derek has children to think about. We were wondering if you might be able to help with the property taxes on their house. It's only $18,000. If we can't pay it by next week, the county will start foreclosure proceedings. Only $18,000, as if that wasn't more than half my annual salary after taxes and loan payments. Mom, let me make sure I understand this correctly. Derek inherited nearly $1 million that should have been mine, lost it all in a scam investment, and now you want me to pay his property taxes? Madison, that's not fair. You're making it sound like Derek stole from you, when you know perfectly well that the inheritance was decided by your parents based on who had earned it. And this isn't about the inheritance anymore. This is about Derek's children having a roof over their heads. Why, I thought about Grandma's letter, about her warning that my parents would try to guilt me into sacrificing myself for Derek's mistakes. I thought about the real will sitting in my dresser drawer, the will that proved Derek hadn't earned anything. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Are you absolutely certain that Grandma wanted Derek to inherit everything? Madison, what kind of question is that? Of course I'm certain. We all heard the will together. What if I told you that I had reason to believe that wasn't Grandma's real will? The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Madison, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Mom. I'm telling you that I've discovered documents that suggest Grandma's real intentions were very different from what we heard in that law office. Madison, you're scaring me. What documents? I took a deep breath. Documents that show Grandma wanted me to inherit the house and the majority of her estate. Documents that show she tried repeatedly to meet with me before she died, but was told I was too busy. Documents that suggest the will Derek inherited from might not have been authentic. Another long silence. Madison, I think you need to be very careful about what you're saying. You're talking about accusing your own family of fraud. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, Mom. I'm just saying that I have evidence that Grandma's real wishes were ignored. Even if that were true, Mom said, her voice getting sharper, it's too late now. Derek has already sold the house. The money is gone. What exactly do you think can be accomplished by digging up the past? And that's when I realized that she knew. Maybe not the details, maybe not the full extent of what they'd done, but she knew that they'd overridden Grandma's real will. She knew, and she was more concerned about protecting Derek than about making things right. Mom, can Derek cover the property taxes himself? Madison, I just told you, he lost everything in the investment. They have no savings left. What about his 20% from Grandma's estate? Even after the bad investment, he should have had some money left over. He used that as part of the initial investment. Madison, you have to understand, Jim Patterson convinced him this was a sure thing. Derek was trying to turn that 20% into enough money to secure his children's futures. I almost laughed. So Derek gambled away not just my inheritance, but his own as well? Madison, this isn't a joke. Tommy and Sophie could lose their home. I thought about Tommy and Sophie, Derek's innocent children who had no part in their father's financial irresponsibility. I thought about the $50,000 in stocks and bonds Grandma had left specifically for me. I thought about the job I'd worked so hard to build, the life I'd created despite getting no help from my family. And then I thought about Derek sitting at that dinner table a month ago, confidently explaining his investment strategy. dismissing my concerns as emotional and unrealistic. "Mom, I'm going to help Derek's family, but not in the way you're expecting." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'm going to make sure Tommy and Sophie have stable housing and education funds. But I'm not going to enable Derek's pattern of financial irresponsibility by bailing him out of another failed get-rich-quick scheme." "Madison, I don't understand. How can you help the children without helping Derek?" "I'll figure it out, Mom. But first, Derek needs to face the consequences of his choices. And more importantly, this family needs to have an honest conversation about what really happened with Grandma's estate." "Madison, please don't do anything rash. Derek is devastated. He knows he made a mistake, but he was trying to do what was best for his family." I looked at the clock on the break room wall. I had 6 more hours left on my shift, 6 more hours of taking care of other people while my own family fell apart from lies and financial irresponsibility. "Mom, I have to get back to work, but I want you to think about something. You said Derek earned his inheritance by being present, by being involved, by thinking about family. What do you call it when someone loses $1 million in a scam investment? What do you call it when someone sells a 60-year family home to chase a get-rich-quick scheme? What do you call it when someone puts their children's security at risk for the chance to make easy money?" "Madison, I call it the opposite of earning anything. I call it proving that maybe Grandma knew exactly what she was doing when she made her real will." I hung up and sat in that break room for 10 minutes, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen. I thought about Grandma's words about breaking the cycle, about not letting them guilt me into sacrificing myself for Derek's mistakes. When I went back to work, I made a decision. I would help Tommy and Sophie, but I would do it on my terms, with my money, according to my values. Derek had lost my inheritance through his own irresponsibility, but he wouldn't get to guilt me into losing my own financial security, too. The real reckoning was just beginning. 2 days later, I called a family meeting. I'd spent those 2 days consulting with my own attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in estate law and fraud cases. She'd reviewed all of Grandma's documents and confirmed what I already knew. The will Derek had inherited from was almost certainly forged, and I had legal grounds to challenge the entire estate settlement. But more than that, she'd helped me understand something important. I had options. I could pursue legal action to recover what was rightfully mine, or I could use the leverage of what I knew to ensure Derek's children were protected while he faced the consequences of his financial recklessness. I'd decided on a third option. We met at Derek and Jennifer's house, the same house that was now in foreclosure because Derek had gambled away not just my inheritance, but their financial security as well. Everyone was there: Mom, Dad, Derek, Jennifer, and even the kids, though Tommy and Sophie were playing in the backyard, unaware that their whole world was about to change. I walked in carrying a folder that contained copies of everything: Grandma's real will, the recording, the documents from the safety deposit box, and the letter she'd written specifically for me. But I also carried something else: a cashier's check for $18,000. Derek looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and he had the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd been lying awake at night contemplating the magnitude of his mistakes. "Madison," he said as I sat down, "I want you to know how sorry I am about everything. I know you're probably thinking I told you so, but I never imagined—" "Derek," I interrupted, "before you say anything else, I need everyone in this family to hear something." I pulled out my phone and played Grandma's recording. Her voice filled the living room, explaining her real intentions, her concerns about Derek's financial irresponsibility, her desire for me to inherit the house and the majority of her estate. The silence after the recording ended was deafening. Mom was the first to speak. "Madison, where did you get this?" "From Mr. Thompson, along with Grandma's real will and several other documents that show she tried repeatedly to contact me before she died." I pulled out the will and set it on the coffee table. This is what Grandma actually wanted. I was supposed to inherit 70% of her estate, including the house. Derek was supposed to get 20%, with conditions that prevented him from selling the house for investment purposes. Derek's face went white. Madison, I don't understand. The will we heard at Thompson's office was forged, I said simply, and you all either knew it or suspected it. Dad stood up abruptly. Madison, that's a serious accusation. Are you saying we deliberately— I'm saying that Grandma's real will exists, that it's legally valid, and that according to estate law, I have grounds to challenge everything that happened over the past 2 months. I could force the sale of Derek's house to recover my inheritance. I could pursue criminal charges for will forgery. I could make sure that Derek not only loses the money he gambled away, but loses everything else he owns trying to pay back what was stolen from me. Jennifer started crying quietly. Derek buried his face in his hands. But, I continued, I'm not going to do any of that. Everyone looked up at me. I'm going to make you all a deal. Derek, I'm going to pay your property taxes today. I slid the cashier's check across the table. This $18,000 will keep your house out of foreclosure for now. Derek reached for the check, but I held up my hand. But here are my conditions. First, you're going to get a job, Derek. Not an investment opportunity, not a business venture, not a partnership with some college friend who promises easy money. A job, with a salary, with benefits. You're going to work that job for at least 2 years before you even think about any other financial risks. Derek nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. I've already been applying. Second, I continued, you're going to sign over guardianship of Tommy and Sophie's education funds to me. I'm going to set up proper college accounts for them, managed by a legitimate financial advisor, and neither you nor Jennifer will have access to that money until they turn 18. Jennifer looked uncertain. Madison, we appreciate the help, but those are our children. Those are children whose college funds were just gambled away by their father, I said firmly. I'm offering to replace those funds and ensure they're protected from future financial mistakes. You can accept my help, or you can try to rebuild their education savings yourselves while Derek learns to hold a steady job. Derek and Jennifer exchanged a look. Derek nodded. Third, I said, turning to my parents. You're going to acknowledge publicly that Grandma's real will was ignored, and you're going to stop telling people that Derek earned his inheritance. I'm not asking you to admit to fraud, but I am asking you to stop perpetuating the lie that Derek was somehow more deserving than me. Mom's face flushed. Madison, you're asking us to humiliate ourselves in front of the whole family. I'm asking you to tell the truth, Mom. There's a difference. Dad sat back down heavily. Madison, what you're proposing, it changes everything. It means admitting that we made terrible mistakes. You did make terrible mistakes, Dad. Derek lost nearly $1 million that should have been mine, and now you want me to bail him out with my own money while pretending that none of this was preventable. I'm offering you a way to make this right without destroying Derek's family, but it requires admitting that Grandma knew what she was doing when she made her real will. I stood up and walked to the window where I could see Tommy and Sophie playing on their swing set. They were laughing, chasing each other around the yard, completely innocent of the financial disaster their father had created. The truth is, I said, still watching the children, Grandma was right about all of us. Derek has never learned to face consequences because this family has always protected him from them. You've all convinced yourselves that Derek's needs are more important than mine because he has children, but children don't benefit from having a father who gambles away their security. They benefit from having a father who works hard and makes responsible decisions. I turned back to face my family. I'm willing to help Tommy and Sophie because they're innocent. I'm willing to help Derek keep his house because foreclosure would hurt them more than it would hurt him. But I'm not willing to pretend anymore that Derek earned something he didn't earn, or that I'm selfish for expecting my grandmother's wishes to be respected. Derek looked up at me with something that might have been the first genuine remorse I'd ever seen from him. Madison, I don't know how to thank you. I know I don't deserve— You're right, I interrupted. You don't deserve it. But Tommy and Sophie do. And maybe if you actually follow through on getting a real job and learning to live within your means, you can start earning the kind of respect that Grandma tried to teach you to value. I picked up my purse and headed toward the door. Madison, Mom called after me, where does this leave us? As a family? I turned back one last time. That depends on whether you can learn to see me as someone whose contributions matter as much as Derek's needs. It depends on whether you can stop treating my financial stability as something that exists to solve Derek's financial irresponsibility. I walked to the door, then paused. I'm not the forgotten daughter anymore. I'm not the one who settles for whatever's left over after Derek gets what he wants. I'm the granddaughter who knows her worth, and I'm not going to let anyone, not even family, convince me to give that up. As I drove home, I felt my grandmother's bracelet against my wrist and thought about her letter, about her warning that this family would try to guilt me into sacrificing myself for Derek's mistakes. She'd been right about everything: the forgery, the manipulation, the pattern of enabling that had turned Derek into a man who could lose $1 million and then expect someone else to fix the consequences. But she'd also been right about something else. I was stronger than they thought. I was stronger than I'd thought. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to stop earning my place in this family and start demanding the respect I'd always deserved.